Good morning, everyone. We are reading in Book 2, the book of the Traveller of the Worlds, Canto 6, the kingdom and godheads of the greater life. And we've reached page 178, and we stopped reading at line 204. Aurobindo'S speaking to us about the power of greater life. In the previous two cantos, where he had shown us the development, the forms and beings and the godheads of the little life. Now he's telling us about the kingdoms and godheads of the greater life. And there is a power, the greater life power. From line 200 he says, "This is her being's law, her hungry will to lavish everywhere her many-imaged fictions of the self and thousand fashions of one reality." This expression of the supreme conscious force of the divine here on the greater life level. She wants to reproduce as clearly and powerfully as possible her dreams and images of her eternal lover. We just heard Mother reading about him, the Lord. So we'll start reading at line 205. You read from the line? Yes, please.
A world she made by clean hand, a world cast into a dream of what it sees, an icon of truth, a conscious mystery's shade. It lingered not like the earth mind and in solid barriers of apparent fact. It dared to trust the dream mind and the soul. A hunter of spiritual verities, still only thought our guests are held by faith. It seized in imagination and confined, a painted bird of paradise in a cage. This greater life is enamoured of the unseen. It calls to some highest life beyond its reach. It can feel the sigh that absolves the soul. It feels a saviour, a ray divine, beauty and good and truth. Its godheads are.
Thank you. Anybody would like to ask anything about these lines?
Yes, why a painted bird of paradise in the cage? The dread.
It says that world that she's made and the goddess who has made it is touched by truth's fleeing hem. Truth which is so ungraspable and undefinable, but it's touched by some, just a passing touch of truth. A world cast into a dream of what it's seeking for. It's aspiring for a higher, happier reality, no? And this world of greater life, it's like a kind of dream, a vision of what it's seeking for.
So the world is seeking for, or what she is seeking for?
It's the same thing. That world that she's made is the expression of her state of consciousness, the state of consciousness that she's embodying. So that world, he says, is an icon of truth. An icon is a sacred image of the truth. It's not the truth itself, but a sacred representation of truth. Its form is the form of a conscious mystery. And that world is not like our world. Our world is hemmed in, limited and confined by solid barriers of apparent fact, of material facts. Maybe they're not even facts, but to us they are real. Matter defines the limits of our world. But this world and the consciousness which it expresses dares to trust the dream mind and the soul, the subtle realities, hints and visions and of future possibilities, higher possibilities. So that world, that consciousness is a hunter of spiritual verities, spiritual truths that are not yet grasped, that are only thought or guessed, or maybe only held by faith as some belief in those higher spiritual verities. But what it does in its life, in its expression, is that it seizes those spiritual verities, those higher truths, sees them in imagination and tries to hold on to them. And he gives this beautiful image which Ganga Lakshmi asked about. Painted bird of paradise in a cage. The bird of paradise represents the higher creative truths, no? But when it gets expressed, even in this world of greater life, it's still in a cage, a golden cage, but it can't fly freely. Yes, it reminds me of a Far Eastern story. I think it's a Chinese story about a
magic brush.
About a painter who has painted on a screen or a wall a fish, a beautiful big fish caught in a net. And it's so real, there's almost the feeling that it might one night escape from the net. So perhaps this dream of a greater life, now it's confined within its painted cage, but perhaps that icon can one day become a manifested reality. Yes.
I'm going to jog your memory a little bit.
Yes.
Because I read a note one time when you told us this story.
Yes.
A Chinese artist painted fishes. He painted them in a net. One night the fish escaped, and he knew his art had accomplished its aim.
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you.
Is that what you remember?
That's what I'm remembering, yes. When the fish escapes from the net, when the bird of paradise escapes from the gilded cage, then the creative urge of the artist is fulfilled. And of course that creative urge, it belongs to this world of the greater life. Thank you, Patricia.
So it's just a mythical bird, is it? It's not an actual bird called bird of paradise, because we know that flower is named bird of paradise by the mother.
Yes, there are many birds of paradise. I believe they are native to Papua New Guinea, Irian Jaya. Amazing birds of paradise. They are, the species or the genus is called that. They're of different, many different kinds. They have glorious, showy plumage. And even here in Oroville, we have a paradise flycatcher. You know that bird? That is a beautiful bird. The immature birds, they have a long brown tail. But when they become mature, maybe 4 or 5 years old, then they have this spectacular trailing white plumes in the tail. This is typical of the birds of paradise. And sometimes they have amazing things growing on their heads. And in those forests, in those deep forests, somehow it seems there's some kind of competition going on which birds can be most noticeable.
But Mother Eve also, the name bird of paradise never moved.
It's a plant, no? One of the plants she has named bird of paradise because it has that name. So this greater life, which now as Sri Aurobindo is showing to us, it is enamoured, it's in love with the unseen, not the obvious, what is unseen, what is dreamed of. It calls to some highest light beyond its reach. So it's aiming for something higher, aspiring for something. It can feel the silence that absolves the soul. This word absolves, it has the connotation of washing free of every impurity. It feels that consciousness can feel a saviour touch, a ray divine, beauty and good and truth are its deities, the deities that it worships.
But again, they cannot change anything here. It's just stable there, like it is, like other words.
It is a typal world, but he will tell us that it's actually very closely connected to our world, and all our higher aspirations come from there. We'll read that a little later on. Patricia.
It is near to heavenlier heavens that earth's eyes see, a direr darkness than man's life can bear. It has kinship with the demon and the God. A strange enthusiasm has moved its heart. It hungers for heights. It passions for the supreme. It hunts for the perfect word, perfect shape. It leaps to the summit flat, the summit light. For by the form, the formless, it is brought close, and all perfection fringes absolute. A child of heaven who never saw his home, its impetus meets the eternal at a point. It can only near and touch, cannot hold. It can only strain towards some bright extreme. Its greatness is to seek and to create.
Thank you. Anything to share?
The first 2 lines, that this is near to heaven and also near to the darkness. No?
Yes.
So,
Kinship with the demon and the God. It's looking on a larger scale than ours and the little life. No? So that larger scale, there's the Asura and the Rakshasa also, no? As well as the God. It hungers for heights, it passions for the supreme. And then it inspires our creativity, the poets hunting for the perfect word, and the artist hunting for the perfect shape, reaching for the highest, most illumining thought and light. Because by achieving some form, even if the form is imperfect, the formless is brought close. All perfection, even our human perfection, fringes the absolute, comes close to the absolute perfection. So he says this world is a child of heaven, but he hasn't, like life in the evolution, it's never seen its home. It has this tremendous impetus and push, but that push meets the eternal only at one point, and it can only come near and touch that point. It can't hold on to it. But still there's this great straining towards some bright extreme. So the greatness of this realm of greater life is in its seeking, constant seeking for higher and more perfect realizations, and its creative force. And now he will speak about that creative life force, the greater life force. Pun.
On every plane, this greatness must create. On earth, in heaven, in hell, she is the same. Of every fate, she takes her mighty part. A guardian of the fire that lights the suns, she triumphs in her glory and her light. Opposed, oppressed, she bears God's urge to be born. Their spirit survives upon non-being's ground. World foes outlaws, world disillusions shock. Dumb, she is still the world, inert, the power. Here fallen, a slave of death and ignorance. To things deathless, she is driven to aspire and moved to know even the unknowable, even nascent, null. Her sleep creates a world.
Thank you. Here fallen, even in our world, where she's a slave of death and ignorance, she's driven to aspire to things deathless, moved to know even the unknowable. Here, where in the material world, where life sometimes appears to be without consciousness, nothing, her sleep creates a world of living beings.
Shraddhavan is now also beautifully describes the urge to learn. When children are born, they are still this, and then often they get oppressed to search this. But that is here really the description that is inner in life.
Yes, there's this greatness which is in us. It's forced to explore and to grow and to learn. And it's this creative urge which has created all these planes of consciousness and this particular world which Sri Aurobindo is showing us now. I'm sorry, I can't hear you very well, sir. Would you speak a little?
I just want to know that how sleep creates the world.
Yes.
The world seems to be vanished when you're sleeping.
That appears so to us. He's speaking about this divine creative force. In matter, there seems to be no conscious force. It's just inert, nothing, it is there. But even in that trance of unconsciousness, that force is causing evolution to go on, so that out of matter life emerges, first in its simplest forms and then in more and more complex forms, and finally mind. On every plane of existence, this conscious force, this greatness must create.
And I'm looking at line 196 on page 178.
Yes.
To kind of keep the idea there. As long as the world lasts, there he lives. Which could be not just the earth, but the universe.
Yes, yeah. But then what he says about this failure of hers, how marvelous it is.
Yes.
A folly and a beauty unspeakable, a superb madness of the will to live, a daring, a delirium of delight. She has to go on creating, and satisfaction never comes, but still she has to follow this hungry will to lavish everywhere her many-imaged fictions of the self and 1,000 fashions of reality. She's giving expression, although in a way veiled, distorted, imperfect expressions of the supreme reality. So this is just one of the worlds she has made, this world which he's telling us about now, this world of the greater life. It's a world touched by truth's fleeing hem. There's a touch of truth there in that world of greater life. And there's this a love for the unseen, the call to some highest light beyond its reach, beauty and good and truth. Its godheads are very different from the godheads of the little life that we read about in the previous canto.
So in that way, earth, heaven, hell, all are different worlds, correct?
Yes, different planes of existence. He uses the word plane.
Does it make any difference between realms and planes, or same word within the
planes are universal planes. And in each plane there may be many kingdoms and realms and domains. So also with this kingdom of greater life, it has many aspects. This is a very long canto. He has a lot to tell us about it. Ravi, you read on?
The kingdom of greater life is in which plane?
It's in the life plane. Yeah? We have seen Mother's map. Yeah? It's the realm of the inconscient, the physical, then comes the life plane. Above that there are the mind planes, several of them. Yes?
When most unseen, most mighty she was, housed in the atom, buried in the core. Her quick, creative passion cannot cease. Inconscience is her long, gigantic force. Her cosmic soul is a stupendous space. Time born, she hides her immortality in death. Her bed, she waits the hour to rise. Even with the light denied that sent her forth, and the hope dead she needed for her task. Even when her brightest stars are quenched in the night, nourished by hardship and calamity, and with pain for her body's handmade massive nerves, her tortured, invisible spirit continues still to toil though in darkness, to create though with pain. She carries crucified God upon her breast, in chill, inconscient,
insentient
depths where joy is known, immured, oppressed by the resisting void, where nothing moves and nothing can become. Still she remembers, still invokes the skill the wonder worker gave her at her birth, imparts to drowsy formlessness of shade, reveals a world where nothing was before.
Thank you.
He's trying the word clot. That's the very beginning.
Sorry?
In the very beginning, the word clot.
Clod, a lump of earth.
Okay.
So if we think about the working of this creative force in the universe, in the manifestation, if we look back on the history of the material universe, there's this whole long period when nothing seems to happen, when matter is gradually prepared, as if there's no consciousness at all in the universe. But Sri Aurobindo says that inconscience, that apparent inconscience, is just a long, gigantic pause of the creative force. Or she's in a swoon, the universal swoon of unconsciousness. It's just a phase of her working, a stupendous phase, as time and space manifest in her workings. She hides her immortality. Things are born and die, no? But in this phase of death, she's just waiting the right time to wake up. Even with the light denied that sent her forth, in the material state, this conscious force doesn't have this light of consciousness that sent her out to do this task, no? And the hope dead she needed for her task, even when her brightest stars are quenched in night. There was a phase in the universe when there weren't any stars. She goes on. She's even nourished by hardship and calamity and pain and suffering. Help her. They are her handmaid, masseurs, nurse, helping matter to awaken and take form, even in that terrible unconsciousness, when only pain is experienced. Her tortured, invisible spirit continues still to toil, though in darkness, in the darkness of unconsciousness, to create, even though it's so painful to create. She carries crucified God upon her breast. The Lord is always with her, but in the manifestation, especially in the early material stages, there's so much resistance to that waking up, to that creative movement. So this is one of the things that Mother has said about the cross and the crucifixion. The upright line is the direct connection between the divine consciousness and matter. There's a bar across it which represents all the resistance that has to be overcome in order for that full, free flow between matter and the Supreme to become possible.
It's very interesting. When I came first time in Savitri, Mama, I had experience. I put my mouth up and I close my eyes and I see big cross. Alors I had to carry it. That is very good for me.
That's all.
But it's very interesting.
Anyway, even though the God is crucified and suffering, still He's with her. Together they are doing this work. So there are chill depths, cold, where there's no senses, no consciousness in the form of senses. So there can't be any delight. There's no joy. At that stage, it's as if she's walled up, immured, surrounded by a wall, oppressed by the resisting void, the emptiness of space, where nothing moves and nothing can become. Even in that state of deprivation, still she remembers, still invokes, she calls down the skill, the power that's been given to her, that the wonder worker, the magician, creator of the universe, gave to her at her birth. She uses that skill to give drowsy formlessness, kind of sleepy formlessness. There's no shape, there's no individuality at all. But she gives shapes to that drowsy formlessness. She reveals a world where there was nothing before. This is the amazing work of creation that she has done.
It's a description of what the truth is of creation. It is a description what the truth of creation is. And I think it's so much important that we know this so that we can support every other being in this process. And like in the prayer, and to see the divine in all things.
Sri Aurobindo tells us this story in different ways, many different ways in different places in the poem. But this is very powerful, isn't it? Why we understand why he calls it the Holocaust of the Divine Mother. That she has made this tremendous sacrifice to leave all that world of blissful, conscious existence and accepted this fall. He calls it the wide and prone leap of a godhead's fall from that level of Satchidananda to the level of pre-matter, we can say, even, has made her soul the substance of our state. And maybe, have I got that right? Oh, I can't look now, I can't find it. So he continues with this description of how it must have been in the beginning. Nihongo, do you read?
To a dark internet of ignorance, a cave of inert unconsciousness, all imprisoned in immobilized worlds of force. My matter's blind compulsion, deaf and mute, she refuges motionless in the dust, then for rebel, waking's punishment, given only hard mechanic circumstance as the engineer of her magic craft. She fashions godlike marbles out of mud. In the pleasant she sets her dumb, immortal urge, fights the lived live tissue to think, knows sense to feel, flashes through the page, not ordinary messages. In a heart of flesh, miraculous love, to brute bodies gives a soul, a will, a voice. Ever she summons, as by a sorcerer's wand, beings and shapes and scenes innumerable, torch bearers of her forms through time and space. This world is her long journey through the night. The suns and planets lend to light her road. Our reason is the confidence of her thought. Our senses are her vibrant witnesses. They are drawing her signs from things half true, half false. She labors to replace by realized dreams the memory of her lost talent.
Yes, thank you. First he speaks of realms, imprisoned, confined realms, to a prone circle of death. There's no life, there's only this dissolution, disaggregation, to a dark eternity of ignorance. That creative force can only express herself just as a quiver in an inert, inconscient mass. Mother has spoken about this, her explanations of the first canto of Savitri in the About Savitri series. There's a line there about how it all was at the beginning, on page 1 actually, line 30. Then something in the inscrutable darkness stirred, a nameless movement, an unthought idea, insistent, dissatisfied, without an aim, something that wished but knew not how to be, teased the inconscient to wake ignorance. And there's a throw, a little movement, convulsive movement, a throw that came and left a quivering trace, gave room for something to start to move. Mother says it's the very, very first movement of aspiration in matter. So that's all this quiver in an inert, inconscient mass. Or maybe there's not even any mass, there's only whirls of force confining her. She remains deaf and mute because she can't express herself in this form of matter. But she refuses to sleep motionless in the dust. She wakes up. Life wakes up. We read about it in Canto 4. So she's beginning to wake up, but she gets punished for that because it's a rebellion against this law, this oppressive law of matter and inertia and refusal of change. So when she wakes up, the only tool that she has to work with is just mechanical circumstances. What happens by the laws of physics? That's the only tool she has to work her magic. And with that tool alone, she fashions godlike marvels out of mud, out of this matter. In the plasm, in the most primitive form of matter, she sets her dumb, immortal urge, that urge which can't be destroyed. So she helps our live tissue to think, our closed, dull senses to feel through the frail nerves of a body. She flashes poignant messages, meaningful, moving messages in a heart of flesh. Miraculously, love. There's a physical heart, but what makes it love? What brings the emotion there? So to brute bodies, crude, rough, material bodies, she gives a soul, a will, a voice, a way to express themselves. And it's as if she's got a magician's wand. She has a magician's wand. beings and shapes and scenes innumerable. She's created all this universe, these scenes, these beings and shapes. They are carrying torches, showing her movement through time and space. This world, this universe, is her long journey through the night. Suns and planets, lamps to light her role. And we human beings are here. She's given birth to us also, and given us not only life and senses, but also reason. Our reason is the confidant of her thoughts. She can give us messages through our reason. Our senses are her vibrant witnesses. All the things that we feel and touch bear witness to her presence. That's in our world. But there, in that world of greater life, she draws her signs from things half true, half false. There in that world, she's laboring, her effort is to replace by realized dreams that memory that she's carrying within her of her lost eternity, that blissful home.
That reference you gave a little earlier. Can you tell me that page?
Sorry, which reference did I give?
You were reading something from an earlier part of Savitri.
Page 130.
Page what?
No, when I started at the beginning of the book, no? That's
a few minutes ago you were reading something.
Page 1 and page.
It's here on the very first page, bottom line.
Oh.
A nameless movement, an old
I see.
thought
Right.
idea.
Okay.
Right?
I didn't hear it.
But now I want to give you another reference. Sorry. This is book 2, Canto 3. Book 2, Canto 3, first section, page 118. There's a sentence. He's been describing life as we know her, up and down, ever dissatisfied. But in the last lines from line 86, he says, yet pure and bright from the timeless was her birth. A lost world rapture lingers in her eyes. Her moods are faces of the infinite. Beauty and happiness are her native right, and endless bliss is her eternal home. So here he refers to the memory, on page 181, line 293. The memory of her lost eternity. Jean-Yves, would you read?
These are verities in this huge world ignorance, till the veil is lifted, till the night is dead. In light or dark she keeps her tireless soul. Time is her own of endless pilgrimage, while mighty passion muddies all over. Her eternal lover is her action's goal, for he she lived forth on the unseen path, to move here in a stark and conscious world. His arts are her commerce with her hidden guests. His moves she takes for her heart's passionate mood. In beauty she treasures the sunlight of his smile. Ashamed of her rich cosmic poverty, she cajoles with her small gifts his mightiness, holds with her scenes his looks fidelity, and woos his large eye modeling force to dwell in figures of a million impulse forth, only to attract her gay companion and keep him close to her breast in her world coat, lest from her arms return to his formless peace, is her heart's business and her clinging care.
Thank you. She's doing all this for her eternal lover, the Lord. For him She leapt forth from the unseen vasts. She was in his breast, united with him, but at his command she has leaped forth to move here in this stark, unconscious world. And everything that happens here is like her exchange with her hidden guest, the hidden guest she's carrying within her. She takes his moods for her heart's passionate molds. We just read her moods are faces of the infinite. In beauty, she treasures the sunlight of his smile. And she's ashamed of her rich, cosmic poverty. Everything that she can do is not enough. No? She gives whatever small gifts she can to please him. She wants to attract his attention, to hold with her scenes his looks' fidelity. She wants to keep him concentrated on her. She woos his large-eyed, wandering thoughts to dwell in figures of her million-impulsed force. This is how Prakriti keeps Purusha enchanted. The only thing that she cares about is to attract her veiled companion and keep him close to her heart, wrapped up in her world cloak. She's afraid that he might turn away from her, back to his formless peace. That's her heart's business and her clinging care. But we read earlier that whoever leaves her, he will not depart. We read that in Book 1, Canto 4. Whoever leaves her, he will not depart to repose without her in the unknowable. For this is sure that he and she are one. As long as nature lasts, he too is there. So he's not really going to turn away and leave her.
So, Shraddhavan,
yes.
If she knows that he will not leave, then why she need to make all this?
Yeah. Perhaps she doesn't know in her when she's in this ignorant state. Maybe she doesn't know that.
I see.
But perhaps these are just images to help us think about things. Let's read one more passage, please, Sudanya.
Yet, when he is most near, she feels him hard.
That's the problem.
Her contradictions is her nature's law. Although she is ever in him and he in her, as if unaware of her eternal life, her will is to shut God into her works and keep him as her cherished prisoner that never daily fall again in time. The something was chamber of the spirit sleep. At first she made a deep interior room where she slumbers as if it forgot to rest. But now she tries to wake the oblivious spirit, awakes the sleepers on the couch of she finds again the presence in the fog and in the light that with he recovers. The living in the hurry and fuse of time and to this mind that once obscured the soul passes a gleam of unseen light.
Let's pause there. He says contradiction is her nature's law, but I think that's not true of the supreme divine nature. It's the lower nature, the lower Prakriti. So she's unaware of that eternal tie and she wants to shut God into her works. So first of all, in the heart of matter, she makes a sumptuous chamber of the spirit's sleep, a deep interior room. So there he is sleeping, as if a forgotten guest. But then a time comes when she wants to wake him up. She turns to break that spell of forgetfulness. She wakens that sleeping presence on the sculptured couch of matter. She finds again presence, the divine presence in the form. And when he wakes up a bit in the light of consciousness that wakes with him, nature, Prakriti, discovers a meaning in the hurry and trudge of time. And through this mind that once obscured the soul passes a glint, a little flash of unseen deity.
It's our mind?
Yes. We are the mental beings.